Welcome to another video about my coloring book collection. In this video I decided to include books by Chris Price and books by L.M.Cullen. And the similar things for these books is that I own them already for a long time. They were one of my oldest books, and in the beginning of my coloring hobby they were much more frequently used by myself comparing to how frequently I use them now. Unfortunately, I don't think that I touched any of these books during the whole year, and I started to experience difficulties coloring in them, both in L.M.Cullen and in this series of the books. Maybe my coloring style changed a little bit. Maybe it's because I started to work with regular pencils more, and that's also changed a little bit my coloring style. I don't know, but I definitely hope that these difficulties somehow will be resolved and that I will be able again to do beautiful works in these books. So I have Sweet Chappé and Curiosity Chappé, both created by Chris Price. I saw them on Coloring YouTube quite long ago and I fall in love with them. I hadn't realized that actually they are quite difficult books for the beginner. So when they arrived from Book Depository, I was confused because of the amount of the black paint here, and also quality of printing. Sometimes not all objects they look quite clear, something looks grainy, but I wasn't very disappointed. I decided that I will try to use here mix of pencils and watercolor, and it's one of the few books which I actually use water-soluble pencils, my set of Kohinoor Mondeluz, which work really well on top of watercolor layer, and this pair watercolor and watercolor pencils really helped me to color here almost without problems. And I did a lot of pictures here. For some time I colored almost couple or even bigger amounts of pictures each month, and it helped me to learn many things. How to show glass inside of the window, how to do all those reflections, how to combine various shades of yellow, brown colors, how to do gold and steel with watercolor. So I'm really grateful to this book for many things. Maybe my current problem is that pictures which are remained uncolored, maybe they are less inspiring for me like this one. Honestly, I don't know how to color normally this teapot, which looks a little bit flat, especially comparing to quite a realistic fair background. I just have to think how to resolve it. But many of the works here I still love. I am proud of them like this one. And because the original painting has a lot of black color, I also tend to use a lot of dark colors, dark shades of watercolor. I think that it helps to create a vintage atmosphere, and also against the dark background, all the yummy things, all the sweets, cakes, they look really nice when you use for them bright colors. This one I definitely love. I think that it was my last finished work because I can recognize here relatively new watercolors created by White Nights when they have these pastel shades, all those peach, pastel pink, cream, and they were quite helpful when I did sweets inside of the jars. And here I am quite proud of my golden bowls and vases. Some of the things, they are a little bit unclear, sometimes they are confusing what we have, so I simply tried in such thing to use one of the natural or dark colors to mask such objects and to attract attention to the elements which I do love on the page. It was quite fun to do all the things inside of the glass jars, to imagine what kind of treats which sweets they have inside, so nice picture. It's one of the oldest, and here I remember that I was extremely proud when I did with watercolors those big bottles for the cream and for the chocolate. The next one I also really love. I remember that I somehow mixed this blue-green watercolor for the background, and I think that it matched all the colors nicely here, all those golden and brown shades which I used, and of course it was quite nice to color all the liqueurs in the central part and all the yummy things which they presented here. I think that we have some kind of ice cream, or maybe some kind of gelato, I don't know, but they look yummy. Another one where I tried to do something like silver tray, at least to create contrasts to the golden and brown colors which I obviously use for chocolate sweets. I remember it also was one of my oldest works. At that moment I almost didn't have any Christmas pictures, so when I realized that I have this one, I was extremely happy. You can see that I colored almost each of the elements, each candy, each sweet thing with different color. It looks terrible, I know, but at that time I had a lot of fun with my watercolors. This one I'm not sure that I want to color at all, but maybe it's a good practice to do the wrapping with golden foil with paints and then couple of the chocolate areas. Just have to decide what to do with the background. Another one which I actually love, even if it's maybe a little bit too dark, but to maintain the vintage style, maybe it's not that bad that I mostly used a lot of dark colors. This one I do love, even if the sky is far from perfect. I wanted to mask those clouds on the sky a little bit to attract more attention to the things inside of the kiosk, and on top of it I do love how this little shop is decorated on top, almost realistic looking ice cream. Here I practiced how to color things visible inside of the jars and through the glass of the jar. You can see that when you can see candies, sweets, they have more intense color here through the opening, and then through the glass colors become less intense, more subdued, more dull, and that's how I tried to create this impression of the glass jars. And of course I added a lot of highlights and I masked black lines. This one is good, maybe I can do this one. It's an old work, and when I colored this one, it was actually good to do the advertising windows and the kiosk, but I wasn't sure what exactly we have here. Maybe another type of outer advertising, just a little bit confusing. It was another page where I practiced to do metal, maybe not so successful here on the refrigerator, but better here on the freezer. This one is not bad, also one of the last works. I remember that I started from covering a lot of areas with brown color, then I did silver details, and as a last step I enjoyed doing all the sweets. I divided them into chocolate and some kind of marshmallow, so they have this delicate pink color. I'm not sure that I want to color these fruits, but maybe one day. It's an old work, but that was the first where I was really very happy with the result, where I managed to use less intense and dull colors for the shelves, for the inner part of them, to attract all the attention for the actual cakes, pop cakes and other sweets which we have here. And I remember that I was quite proud of this glass cover for the sweets. This one is extremely boring. This one, it wasn't bad, even if it was a little bit difficult to decide what to do with the strange columns here and things which we have behind. I decided that maybe it's a view. So we have here some kind of the window and we can see part of the city behind. Of course, I was much more concerned how to color the texture of the basket, and I remember that it took me some time. I added first very light yellow ochre colors, then I added more reddish browns and darker brown colors to show texture and also to show shadows on the wooden surface of the table, on the basket. So it was a nice thing to learn. Probably far from being perfect, but at least, as I said, it really helped me to improve my skills in watercolor coloring. It's also one of my very old Christmas works. I did it together with that nail page. And that's one also a practice for how to do the glass jars. This one I did when I had to color something for Easter and I didn't have any other things, but actually I think that it looks not bad. I do love how I did eggs here in the basket and all those chocolate bunnies and probably some kind of gingerbread or cookies on the upper shelf. I remember that here the initial line art, it was already quite dark, so not very easy to cover it. That's the only page which I did in this book using alcohol-based markers, because of course with such an intricate details on the lace, I didn't have enough patience to do it with brush or with pencil, so I selected markers. And finally we have this one which I started but somehow was distracted. I think that maybe I even had the beginning of this, the video for the beginning of this page somewhere on my laptop, so maybe I will continue to color it. But I also have this one. Here I try to practice how to do the cello wrapping around the lollipops, so that's why I used so many strokes of the white paint. Maybe not very realistic, but I tried. At least the glass jars here, they are not bad, and the ice cream looks yummy. So that was the Sweet Chopin. And the second one is Curiosity Chopin. Here I think that I have 3 pages and nothing changed from my last review from the last year. I did this armor. You know that I love to color knights, I love to color their armor, and I think that at this stage I managed to do it well at a decent level. I especially love this one, which has nice highlights on the metal surface, also reflections of the nice sunlight coming from the stained glass window, so that's why I added a little bit of yellow. Also it has nice dark shadows. Here it was complicated because I would say that without such intricate window frame around the stained glass window, it would be easier to attract attention and actually to the armor of the knights. And this frame, it was a little bit confusing. I even tried to use only blue color to slightly mute it, but I don't think that I succeeded a lot. And also a lot of lines around, probably too much those lines which I converted into some kind of wooden supporters like we have in museum to support the armor. Well, maybe the whole page is a little bit too crowded, too detailed, but some of the elements are definitely not bad. Well, these books, they are not very comfortable to flip. That one was quite fun to do. I started from covering the background with basic two colors, a little bit of gray blue to represent glass and mirror, and then a lot of brown to cover the rest of the background, for the table, for the floor, for the shelves and for the walls. And then I imagined many kinds of fashionable hats. We have hats for men, for women, and it was quite fun to do, especially the military caps here. And finally I have this one with the minerals. It also was quite interesting to try to find among all my watercolors pairs of light and dark paints to be able to do shiny gemstones. You can see that I did them in various color patterns, color palettes, so I think that it's not bad. Here I wasn't happy again with the quality of printing. It was too dark for my taste, but using some Posca, I think that I managed to somehow to resolve this problem. Yeah, I think that it's all for this book, even if it has a lot of nice things. Maybe now when I will look at it, I will find a new inspiration for it, because I still treasure it a lot, and many things here, probably they are easier to color even comparing to the Sweet Shopper. Here we can more clearly see things, so it's easier to decide about colors. I will try to think and to color in this book something in the beginning of the next year. The next series of the book where I started to feel a lot of difficulties when I tried to color them, it's books by Livre. They are quite dear for me. From this book started my coloring hobby when I saw them on the channel of Peter Hewitt. From these books started my own channel because I posted my own coloring video from Magical City. But now I don't know what has happened. Maybe again it's because I started to color more with regular pencils. So when I color with Inktense, I am slightly bothered that everything doesn't look very smooth and something looks a little bit uneven when I apply water. Or maybe in Magical City I have difficulties because pictures which I still need to color in this book, they are not very inspiring for me. To color them only to finish this book, maybe, but I still wasn't in such mood to see it, to somehow color them even without pleasure. I don't know. I remember how much I enjoyed doing these spreads. Maybe because they indeed were interesting, I tried to find all the famous places here, trying to find colors for them both in realistic and fantasy style, but with the remaining pictures, I don't have such luck. Well, I can color this one, but I don't think that I can do something quite unique here, but just to color. Maybe I can try to color them with watercolor to change from Inktense to some other medium. You can see that I started to do pictures. I tried to do these roofs and chimneys, and I even tried to color them in quite fantasy way, doing gradient on roofs and original color for the buildings, but still somehow it simply didn't work for me, and honestly I don't know how to explain it. I hope that simply one day somehow this problem, this coloring stop, somehow it will be resolved. Many of these pictures, they are quite dear for me, but now when I look here, Now I prefer to do more intense shading, more contrast shadows. So maybe it's difficult for me to switch between the more realistic style of coloring which I do in almost all my pictures in this more colorful but simplified way. That was the spread where I started to post color alongs on my videos, so it's quite dear for me. I remember how nervous I was, and I'm very grateful to the people who stayed on with my channel with me from the beginning of my coloring hobby. I experimented a lot on this book. I tried to start this spread. I think that it was inspired from the maybe big palace in Paris, so you know that exhibition center. But I wasn't able to find appropriate colors for the building from my Inktense set, so I can't resolve my problem for now. I don't want to do like average work simply to color. I want to do something interesting, but unfortunately, my inspiration for Lizzie Mary Cullen's book, it's totally left me. I hope that one day it will be returned. This spread, this one, it's not bad actually. But of course, now I prefer to color something a little bit more detailed, so that's why I always postpone to do these pictures even during the winter time. If you have any good advice what I need to do, how to resolve this my problem with all the books by Lizzie Mary, then I will be happy to hear. This one, it's not bad. This one, it's a little bit boring. Of course, such pictures, they are much more interesting comparing to those which I still have to color. Now I'm a little bit unhappy how Inktense here late. When I did it, I wasn't bothered that the coverage is uneven. Now I wouldn't say that I like it. Even if my book is printed on relatively good paper, you can see that all pictures which simply like stairs and windows, I wasn't able even to finish them. I tried to color, but it's something absolutely not interesting, so I abandoned it. I remember this one, it was so much pleasure to do it. Surprisingly, it was one of the most interesting spreads to color. When I started it, I was sure that it's absolutely boring. I don't like to color patterns. But then I looked at the Marrakesh gardens. I tried to find for myself basic colors which we can find there in architecture and in plants and flowers, and I tried to incorporate them in these ornaments and patterns. Almost everywhere I used Inktense apart from couple of pictures where I experimented with Faber-Castell felt tip pens. Probably the book which has the biggest chances to be colored is A Magical Journey, because here I still have a lot of nice pictures which are interesting, which are dedicated to some places which I can study to find some reference photos, inspirational photos. So maybe this book, it will be the first where I will be able finally to color something again. some of the pictures, they started to be like too much for me now. Maybe too much colors, too much details. But some of the spreads I still really love. Like this one and this one. I remember I was so proud that I did unusual color on the tree. I thought that maybe it's a marble tree during the fall season when they start to have red and orange yellow leaves, and I thought that it will be a good contrast to the color of the palace. It was my first and last attempt to do portrait with ink pens, and it was almost a disaster. Then with water I tried to delete excessive amount of pigment, and then this dark background, it also managed to bleed through on the portrait. This one I do love, mostly because of how this color looked together with violet. This one also is not bad. Maybe I need to start from something small like this one, or with these flowers. They are also not very difficult to color. I don't know how previously I found enough courage to start spreads like this one. This one also was quite interesting to do, and I still think that it's quite good. Here I already started to use neocolor crayons for the skies mostly, and it also helped me to improve a little bit the look of my pictures. I always was concerned about big empty skies. I usually tried not to color such pictures until I got my neocolor crayons, because ink pens for the big empty backgrounds, they still left some uneven traces, uneven marks from the pencil, and with neocolors it started to be much easier to do backgrounds. Another strange but nice. I don't know why I decided to do such color for the water, just to be out of my comfort zone. I was tired of traditional blue water. This spread I do love. Both pages are good, and again I used neocolors. They really helped me. I don't want to do this one. Next I used neocolors, I used even acrylic paint, and of course I used ink pens. It was quite interesting to study the history of the Route 66, so I tried even to add a little bit of some kind of map. I think that it was my last picture which I did in this book, and I was so confused which colors to use for the sky that I decided to use totally fantasy palette, and I think that it worked relatively well. It looks strange, but for this style of the book, for all those crazy colors, I think that here the sky is good. Another interesting spread, which I mostly did when we had color-alongs in Facebook group dedicated to Livre work. At that time, when we had those color-alongs, I colored a little bit more in these books. And yeah, I think that's all here. I have a book about France, and in French book I did one page with Prismacolors, and actually I loved how they behaved here. Probably I enjoyed using them here more than I enjoyed using ink pens. Probably it was the beginning of my fall. So when I started to enjoy working with delicate shading of Prismacolors comparing to more rough colors of Inktense, that probably was the first sign that something isn't good with me. Here on the left I did this crazy background. The building here, it was inspired of the building by Musée d'Orsay in Paris, where we have a lot of paintings of famous Impressionist painters, and I decided that even if the Starry Night painting by Van Gogh isn't in this museum, I still can use it as an inspiration for the background, so that's why I have such a crazy background here. This one is simple and easy and still nice. And I think that I still have at least one page here, just need to find it. Yeah. From this one I started to color in this book. And plenty unfinished pictures. So we will move from France to England. I would say that I prefer Teleho book comparing to France book a little bit more. Maybe because here we have less patterns and more actual buildings, because I love Mary Cullen because of her paintings of places and buildings, not from the ornaments which she put into the Spanish and French books. So here it was the first test when I got my Derwent graphite pencils. I thought that they can be quite good for architecture. Here I think that I used I used probably a little bit of Neocolors for the background and then Inktense pencils. Next we have this quite cute heart. I colored it once for the St. Valentine's Day, again because usually I don't have big amount of pictures which I can color for St. Valentine's, not many pairs or something like this. So I finally found this heart and I did it. This one I absolutely love, but again here I used regular Prismacolors for the Queen Elizabeth and Inktense only for the background behind. With Anne Boleyn I had a huge struggle. When I colored her, it was quite easy. I did her dress, I added golden embroidery on the sleeves and on the fabric of her green dress. Of course, I was inspired by the famous song Green Sleeves, which probably was dedicated to Anne by King Henry, but when I started to do the background, it was a nightmare. I think that I changed color maybe 4 times, and in the end somehow I managed to do those vertical brown lines with acrylic, and it helped to make background much less intense. Simple dark color helped not to distract attention from the N, and in the end I decided that okay, it will work for me, and it even looks like Tudor style walls when they have a lot of wooden panels, carved wood attached to the walls. So I decided that this is brown, it will help me, and indeed it created not the worst background. Definitely not the best, but also not the worst. Here I try to imitate stained glass window. Here on the background again I used Inktense, but apart from couple of shades of yellow I also tried to leave a lot of white uncolored areas to show that the light actually is coming through the glass. And of course for the figures here I tried to use mostly those colors which were available for medieval creators of stained glass windows. So simple red, simple blue, grey, gold colors, nothing very fancy. and I do love how it turned out. But for the many areas like frames here and architectural details, I used Prismacolor's shades of French grey. This one was made completely with Inktense, and of course I did it because I do love this series about the Downton Abbey, and here we have this building. And finally somewhere here we have Hampton Court, if I remember correctly, yeah, here. Again, here I decided to do something unusual with the trees, so they are totally in fantasy style, but at least the real color of the palace I tried to maintain. Well, that's all I think for the tally-ho. And now we are going to the magical Christmas. I know that many of you requested me to color something here, and I actually started one page, but still without big success. I don't know even what to say. It simply doesn't work for me. So here we have this very bright spread, which initially I didn't like when I started it, maybe because I didn't like how the maybe patterns, maybe the look of the toys, but in the end I decided that maybe I can do something good from this one. You can see that I started to color. It was so boring that I left it. I still have this part of the video. I probably will do the second attempt, but I'm not sure that I simply want to color it. This one actually is good, but I'm afraid to start coloring it until I will feel again that vibe which I usually had when I started to do Livre Cullen's work. To color it just from boredom, I don't want to spoil such a good spread. It's one of the best in the book. Now let's move. This one I do love, mostly because I think that I did the right thing when I did such a bright angel. He definitely is a focal point here, but I also love this Christmas tree. It's in unusual colors, but for me it looks amazing. And also this one, it's also quite cute. This one I totally consider one of my best works. It was interesting to do. And I'm still proud how I did shading on the snow with Inktense pencils, how I did this fantasy sky above the Victorian London. Here it was interesting to invent colors, trying to create a very bright Christmas in Brazil. Here, unfortunately, some of the white pigment white gel pen, it was stamped into the dark indigo acrylic background here, and now it looks a little bit untidy. Maybe I need to cover it with another layer of dark indigo, and then it will look better. I remember that here I mostly practice how to draw all those snowflakes. I did this pearlescent watercolor first, and then on top of it I added snowflakes, and it's a good source. Now when I need to draw somewhere snowflakes, I go there to find some good patterns, because there I invented a lot of them. This one is good and festive. And again here Neocolors helped me to do this crazy huge background, and then on the candles I wanted to use contrast cold colors, so I used Inktense. If you need some of these pictures, they all are in the playlist on my channel, Livre works, and I think that Magical Christmas by Livre in individual playlist. Anyway, I will leave links to the playlists in the end of the video. Maybe you will be more lucky and you still feel inspiration to do something in her books. I remember that it was crazy long coloring. It's German Christmas markets, and actually I colored it quite long for a long time. I do love this one because it has unusual colors. I usually don't do orange backgrounds, but here it worked well, quite festive. Surprisingly, together with magenta, orange looked quite well. Here I experimented a lot. I did black acrylic background, then on the pine trees I used acrylic paint to do better needles here. Then all those crazy swirls which we also had, I outlined with silver gel pen, so everything is quite shiny. And here I experimented with stamps which I had from my previous hobby, scrapbooking, so I stamped them and I did this blue background. I think that they look quite snowy, like a snow pattern on the frozen window probably. Here we have the nutcracker, and this one I do love, it's not bad. Another very long coloring, and I worked element by element trying to think which colors I can use for the Elizabeth I time Christmas. I also added those roses of her family with two petals, red and white, so like her symbol. I hope that because of the very bright red dress, she is definitely the focal point here, but also think all those yummy things on the table. The feast is quite bright and also it was interesting to do. Here I had Victorian time style because Christmas, because here we have Sherlock obviously, so I tried to use a lot of dark brown and dark green colors for the interior. Well, maybe it's not bad, I'm not sure about the color of the curtain here, and I remember that it was extremely boring to do carpet. I don't know, but somehow I don't like to color carpets when Livre do interiors. They always bother me and they distract attention from the main characters. This one I started last year. You can see that my problems, they started not recently, even in the previous December I didn't like how my pencils, I tried to do interesting gradient, just like I do with regular pencils. If I would color a gingerbread man, I would add a little bit of brown, a little bit of more reddish brown, a little bit of orange and yellow. I started to do it here. I wasn't happy how they blended. I was disappointed and I abandoned it and I went to something with what I can color with regular pencils. Here I have such a stupid background. Absolutely dislike it. I think that it was one of my first works here, so maybe the first one. I do love this one, a very popular video on my channel. I know that many people repeated this page, so I am very happy that it can serve as a source of inspiration. I think that this one I did last year, something not bad, but also because I combined regular pencils, for example here on the leaves, and ink pens. This spread is definitely good. I always loved it. And that's the end of the sad story of my recent relationship, my current relationship with Lizzie Mary Cullen's book. I hope that I somehow will manage to resolve this problem and that I will return to these books. But as I said, I am fortunate that I have many books and many materials for coloring, so when I can't color in one of the book, I can easily switch to other beautiful books. So I hope to see you in the next series. Thank you for listening and for watching.